Today I will be starting with brainstem. Okay. So exactly what you have to study in the brainstem that you must know, because it is a very important and complex topic. Okay. So here you can see there are some points which I have mentioned. This is how we are going to study the brainstem. Okay. Now in brainstem, in physiology, I hope you have studied about the brainstem. Okay, please stop talking. Enough is enough. In physiology, have you studied anything about brainstem? Yes. Okay. So here, what we have to study. Okay. See, in general, brainstem is a complex topic, difficult topic. It's not that simple. Okay. Now, in the brainstem, first of all, we have to know there are some points, important points related to the brainstem. Okay. Then the location of the brainstem, where the brainstem is exactly located. So you have seen the skull. Okay. Now inside the cranial cavity, cranial fossa are present, interior cranial fossa, middle and posterior cranial fossa. So in that, where exactly the brainstem is situated, that you have to know. Okay. Next, the subdivisions of the brainstem. Okay, where the brainstem, what are the subdivisions of the brainstem, and along with that, okay, you have to know the subdivisions of the brainstem. So everyone, you know that brainstem is divided into three parts. Okay, from below upward, it is medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. Okay, so these are the three parts of the brainstem. Okay, next, there are some important functions also as a whole. Now each and every part is having different functions. Okay, as we will go in each and every part at that time, that will be discussed. But overall, brainstem is having important functions that you have to know, that you must know. Okay. Next, from this particular part, how you have to study. Once you have studied about the subdivisions. Okay, three subdivisions are there. Medulla is there, then pons is there, and then midbrain. So these are three subdivisions. Now from these subdivisions, how to study about the brainstem. So here two parts are there. First is the external features and then internal feature. Okay. Now external feature means, suppose the brainstem, what you can see externally. You have taken the brainstem in your hand, what you can see externally, that is the external feature. That also you have to study methodically. That means from the anterior aspect and from the posterior aspect. Okay. That means what can be seen on the anterior aspect, what can be seen on the posterior aspect. This is the way to study the external features of the brainstem. Okay. Don't mix. I am specially mentioning about this particular part. When you will be studying about the external features of the brainstem, see, I have mentioned separately anterior aspect and posterior aspect. So suppose you are studying about the medulla oblongata. Okay. So when you will see the medulla from anterior aspect, जो दिखाई देगा, whatever you can see, it will be the features of the anterior aspect. Okay. Come. Same for the posterior aspect. Along with that, though these are external features, okay, so externally you will see that in the medulla oblongata, cranial nerves are attached. Last 10 cranial nerves. Okay, last 10 cranial nerves. That means from number 3 to 12, all these cranial nerves are attached to the brainstem. Okay, so you have to know that which cranial nerves are attached to the which part of the brainstem. For example, if medulla is there, which are the cranial nerves attached to medulla? If it is pontomedullary junction, which nerves are attached? If it is midbrain, which nerves are attached? Okay. Now, in most of the cases, do you know that the cranial nerves arises from the ventral aspect of the brainstem? Okay. So, how many cranial nerves are attached to the brainstem? Last 10. Okay, last 10 cranial nerves are attached to the brainstem. Okay, last 10 cranial nerves are attached to brainstem. Among them, all are arising from the ventral aspect of the brainstem except one. Can you tell me which one? जो brainstem होता है. Okay. Here you can see the diagram. Don't know what is wrong with this one. So here you can see so many cranial nerves are attached. Now here you can see almost all the cranial nerves are attached in the ventral aspect of the brainstem. Okay, ventral aspect of the brainstem except one. Which is this? That is the trochlear nerve. Trochlear nerve, or also called as fourth cranial nerve. That is arising from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem, dorsal aspect of the midbrain. Okay, that is the only exception about trochlear nerve. So short question यहाँ से आता है. In MCQ you can expect questions from there. Okay, remaining all the nerves are coming from the ventral aspect. Only one nerve which is coming from the dorsal aspect, that is the trochlear nerve. Okay, so these points, as I said, for external features. Next, for the external features, once it is done, then we have to study the internal features. Okay, so how to study the internal features of the brainstem? For that you have to take cross section. Okay, so total 8 cross sections are there, and that is the most difficult part of the brainstem. Okay, last 3 come and sit in the first bench. Last 3. So in case of brainstem, the most difficult part is over here, the internal features. Okay, this is the most difficult part of the brainstem. Why? Because here what you have to do, you have to take the TS of the brainstem. Okay, and then you have to study the interior. So when you will study the interior, at that time you will see grey matter is there, white matter is there. So you have to mention where the grey matter are present, where the white matters are present. Okay, and along with that the cavity. Okay, along with that the cavity, for example, which part of the ventricle, which part of the aqueduct of Sylvius is there, that you have to mention. Okay, so that makes it very difficult. So total 8 sections are there, 4 in medulla, 2 in pons, 2 in midbrain. Okay, so 4 plus 4, total 8 sections are there. Okay, and this particular section makes it very difficult. After that blood supply is there and then applied. Okay, so this is how we are going to discuss about the brainstem. Okay, so you will notice one thing, that as we go further, for example, as we discuss the medulla, pons, midbrain, you will come to know where each and every cranial nerve, okay, that last 10, where they are attached. Okay, in external features you will only see the fibers from where they are coming out. Okay, next when we will study the internal structure, that means we will take the TS, at that time specific nuclei of the cranial nerves from where the fibers are coming, that will also be discussed. Okay, so this will help you to understand not only about the brainstem but also about the cranial nerves, the specific nucleus of the cranial nerve, each and every cranial nerve, how many nuclei are there. I am talking about last 10. Okay, and from where the fibers are coming out, that will also be discussed with this one. Okay, so I hope you have seen, I have given green and tick, green markings. That means these particular points are important. Okay, during the time of exam, you will see that if the questions are asked, this will be asked from this particular points only. Okay, that means from the external features, from the TS at various level, blood supply and applied. Okay, so you have to highlight more on these particular points. Okay, so brainstem, as you know, it is a stalk-like part of the brain. Okay, which is connecting the spinal cord to the forebrain. Connecting the spinal cord to the forebrain. It is a stalk-like, or you can say stem-like structures. Okay. Now 3 parts are there, as I have mentioned: medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. That means from below upwards, if you see the parts of the brainstem, these are the parts of the brainstem. Okay. Now the superior most part is the midbrain, and the lowest part is the medulla oblongata. Below medulla oblongata, it continues as spinal cord. Above the midbrain, it continues as cerebral hemisphere. Okay. Next, if you see the location, it is situated at posterior cranial fossa. Okay, it is situated at posterior cranial fossa, anterior part of the posterior cranial fossa, and it is lying on clivus, CLIVUS. Now, in the skull bone, have you seen clivus? Let me show you the diagram of clivus. Here you can see this particular part is called as clivus. Okay. Next, so anteriorly it is lying on clivus like this. It will be lying on the clivus, which is on the anterior aspect of the posterior cranial fossa. Okay. Now, posterior to the brainstem, what is present? Any idea? Posterior to the brainstem, what will be present? Cerebellum. जो ब्रेनस्टेम होता है, ब्रेनस्टेम के पोस्टीरियरली क्या रहता है? Cerebellum. Now the cerebellum is separated from the brainstem by the cavity of fourth ventricle. Okay. Now here you can see in the diagram. So please concentrate in the diagram. Now here you can see the location of the brainstem. Okay, you can see the parts of the brainstem. This is the midbrain, this is the pons, and this is the medulla. Now just behind that you can see the cerebellum is present. Now the cerebellum is separated from the brainstem by the cavity of fourth ventricle. Okay. Next, if you see the nerve cells of the brainstem, especially I am talking about the grey matter. Okay, they will not aggregate to form a single mass of grey matter like the spinal cord. We have studied the structure of spinal cord, if you remember, in histology, right? So when you take a section of the spinal cord, what you can see central mass of grey matter, H-shaped. Okay? But same thing cannot be seen in case of brainstem. Instead of that, well-defined nuclei are present at various locations of the brainstem. Okay, so that is the unique differences. So as we will study the internal structure, the TS, at that time we will come to know about the aggregation of this grey matter which are forming specific nuclei inside the brainstem. Okay. Next, the tracts which are traveling through spinal cord. So there are some ascending tracts, and there are some descending tracts. Okay. Now those tracts are also present in the brainstem, and along with that there is a very specific diffuse set of fibers and nerves, and these are called as reticular formation. Okay. Diffuse system of nerve cells and nerve fibers are present, that is called as reticular formation. Very important because it maintains the consciousness of a person, reticular formation. Okay, so that is also present inside the brainstem. Okay, next in the brainstem, some important functions are there. What are those functions? First of all, provides passage for various ascending and descending tracts that connects the spinal cord with the different parts of the brain. So the tracts, you have studied the tracts, ascending, descending tracts. Okay, so after spinal cord, they has to travel through brainstem, and then they are reaching at the various part of the brain. Okay. Next, vital centers are present. Can anyone tell me what are the vital centers present in the brainstem? 3 important vital centers are present. Okay, respiration center, respiration rate center is there. Then center which is controlling the blood pressure. Okay, so this particular autonomic reflex centers, vital centers are very important. Okay, because they are controlling the rate of respiration, heart rate, blood pressure, etc. Okay. Next, reticular activating system is there, which is controlling the consciousness of a person. And lastly, it is giving attachment to last 10 cranial nerves. Okay, so last 10 cranial nerves are attached to the brainstem. Okay, so these are some important common functions of brainstem. Okay, now each and every part is having separate functions. Now in order to study the external features, okay, in order to study the external features, what I have mentioned, how we will study the external features. See there what I have written. For external features, we have to see the anterior aspect and we have to see the posterior aspect of the brainstem. But we don't have to study the brainstem as a whole. Okay, first we will be studying about the medulla, then pons, and then the midbrain. Okay, so in this diagram you can see this is the anterior aspect of the entire brainstem, where you can see this is the medulla, this is the medulla, this is the pons, and this is the midbrain. That also anterior aspect, okay, anterior view of the brainstem. Okay, so here you can see so many points are seen. Along with that, you can see the cranial nerves are present. So why I am showing you this, so that you can understand whenever you are studying the external features of any part of the brainstem, first you see the anterior view and then see the posterior view. Things will get easier. Don't mix it. Next, whenever you are writing in the exam, okay, external features, at that time also segregate it. Features on the anterior view, features on the posterior view. Okay. So we'll start with the medulla oblongata. Okay. So it is a direct continuation of the spinal cord. Medulla oblongata, direct continuation of the spinal cord, extending from the foramen magnum. So you have you have studied the base of the skull, right? In the base of the skull, you have seen foramen magnum. So this medulla oblongata is extending from the foramen magnum to the lower border of the pons. Okay, that is the extent of the medulla oblongata. Okay. Next, it forms the lowest part of the brainstem, as I have shown you just now. The lowest part of the brainstem is formed by the medulla oblongata. Okay. Now, if you see, the medulla oblongata is also lying in the posterior cranial fossa. It is lying on the clevus. Okay, and posteriorly, if you go, then what you will get? You will get the valgula of the cerebellum, or you can say cerebellum. Okay. In the diagram, I have shown you that on the posterior aspect of the brainstem, okay, you will be getting the cerebellum. So in case of medulla also it will be same, but if you are if you have to see the specific part, okay, of the cerebellum, then it will be the valgula of the cerebellum. Cerebellum is not yet discussed, so I am not going into the valgula of the cerebellum. Please keep that in mind that medulla posteriorly is related to the valgula of the cerebellum. Okay. Now, if you see the shape of the medulla, it is a truncated cone. Okay, it is cone shaped, but it is truncated. That's why it is also called as bulb. B-U-L-B, bulb. Okay. Now, if you see the dimensions of the medulla oblongata, the dimensions are 3 cm in length, 2 cm in breadth, and thickness is approximately 1.25 cm. That means very small size of the medulla oblongata. Now, vital centers are there, 3 vital centers: cardiac centers, vasomotor centers, and respiratory center. Okay. So, in the common functions, I have mentioned that in case of brainstem, 3 important vital centers are present. All these 3 vital centers are present in medulla itself. Okay. So, what are the vital centers? Cardiac centers, vasomotor center, and respiratory center. Okay. Next, the lower part. Okay. If you see the lower part, it is continuing as spinal cord. Okay. Now, in the lower part of the medulla oblongata, the central canal is present, and that central canal will be continuing in the spinal cord. Okay. Next, in the upper part. So, in the lower part of the medulla oblongata, the central canal is present. But if you see the upper part of the medulla, that also the dorsal aspect of the medulla, then what happens? This central canal is not closed, it is open. Okay, and that is forming the lower part of the floor of fourth ventricle. Okay. Now here you can see the medulla oblongata. Now can anyone tell me which view of the medulla oblongata is this? Anyone, which view of the medulla oblongata is this? Anterior view or posterior view? Anterior view. Okay, this is the anterior view. Now, there are some important external features which can be seen from the anterior view that we have to know, we have to understand. Okay? So first of all, you can see anterior median fissure is there. See, this is the anterior median fissure. So in the spinal cord, do you remember we have studied the anterior median fissure is there, and posterior median, what is present? Sulcus is there. We have studied the TS of spinal cord in histology. So how to identify, after taking TS, how to identify which is anterior aspect, which is posterior aspect? On the anterior aspect, fissure is present. Posterior aspect में क्या रहता है? Sulcus is present. Okay. So the depth of the fissure is more. So that anterior median fissure is continuing. Same anterior median fissure is continuing in the medulla oblongata. तो स्पाइनल कॉर्ड का जो एंटीरियर मीडियन फिशर है, सेम एंटीरियर मीडियन फिशर इज प्रेजेंट ओवर हियर एज यू कैन सी. Okay, now but there is a point. Now here the anterior median fissure in the lower part of the medulla oblongata is not well marked. जो fissure रहता है generally, जो fissure है the depth is more, that's why it is well marked. That means you can see it clearly and you have seen under microscope also, right? But in the lower part of the medulla it is not well marked. Why? Because of the decussation. I hope you can see it is not clearly visible because of the decussation. Now what is this decussation? This is decussation of pyramidal fibers. Okay, decussation because of pyramidal fibers. Okay, so the pyramidal fibers which are coming from the cerebral cortex, okay, various parts of the cerebral cortex, what happens? The decussation takes place. What is the meaning of decussation? What is the meaning of decussation? Crossing over. Okay, ये देखो ऐसे होता है, यहाँ पे ऐसे होता है, like this. Okay, that means right side fibers are going to the left side and left side fibers going to the right side. Approximately 75 to 80% of the fibers, ठीक है, the pyramidal fibers decussation is taking place over here. That's why you have seen that if there is any injury on the right side of the cerebral hemisphere, left side used to get paralyzed. Have you noticed? I hope you have seen patient getting paralysis. ठीक है, तो अगर right cerebral hemisphere में मान लो any part of the right cerebral hemisphere is damaged, okay, particularly where those nerves are arising or nerves are getting damaged, then what will happen? The left side will get paralyzed. ऐसा क्यों होता है? Why it happens? Because of the decussation. 75 to 85% of the fibers decussate to each other. Okay, so because of the decussation, the anterior median fissure is not well marked in the lower part of the medulla oblongata. Okay, rest you can see the anterior median fissure clearly. ठीक है. Next, on the both the side, okay, that means if you go laterally on either side of the anterior median fissure, then you can see a elevation. You can see an elevation that is called as pyramid. Okay, that is called as pyramid. Okay, so that is because of the accumulation of the pyramidal fibers. Next, if you go more laterally, then here you can see another sulcus is present, that is called as posterolateral sulcus. Okay, that is called as posterolateral sulcus. So here first what you have seen, first you can see the anterior median fissure. Okay, now this is the anterior aspect. Next, when you go to the posterior aspect, in the midline you will see a sulcus is there, that is called posterior median sulcus, right? That is same in case of spinal cord. Here from anterior median fissure, if you go laterally, then first the elevation which you are getting, that is the pyramid. From pyramid, if you go more laterally, then you will be getting the posterolateral sulcus. You can see this is the posterolateral sulcus. Okay, which can be seen on either side. Okay, next, if you go more laterally, then another oval elevation is there, that is called as olive. See, another oval elevation is there, that is called as olive. Okay, now this, why this elevation is present? This is because of the underlying inferior olivary nucleus. Okay. Now what is inferior olivary nucleus, that we will see in the internal structure. Now we are in external structure. ठीक है, so externally क्या क्या दिखाई देता है, we are discussing that. Okay, in internal, when you will take the section, suppose you have taken a section over here like this, at that time the section will be going through the olive also. At that time we will be discussing about the olivary nucleus. Okay, so don't mix whenever you are studying about the internal and external one, you will get confused. ठीक है. So whatever I have discussed is mentioned. The medulla is divided into right and left symmetrical half by the anterior median fissure and posterior median sulcus. ठीक है. Posterior median sulcus situated posteriorly, anterior median fissure situated anteriorly. Okay. Now it is continuous below with the corresponding fissure of the spinal cord. Okay. And it is extending up to a small triangular depression, which is called foramen cecum. Okay, up to the lower border of the pons. That is the extent of the anterior median fissure. Okay. Next, in the lower part, as I said, it is interrupted by decussation of the pyramids or pyramidal fibers. Okay. Next, you can see each half of the medulla is marked by two sulci. Okay, what are the anterior lateral and posterior lateral sulcus? Okay, anterior lateral sulcus is there and posterior lateral sulcus is there. So anterior lateral sulcus extend along the lateral border of the pyramid. Okay, where the rootlets of the hypoglossal nerves are coming out. So anterior lateral sulcus, just now I have shown you lateral to the pyramid, the sulcus which is present, that is called the anterior lateral sulcus. Okay. Through anterior lateral sulcus, the rootlets of the hypoglossal nerves are coming out. So this is the first nerve which we have encountered. Hypoglossal nerve is the 12th cranial nerve, last cranial nerve. Okay. Next, the posterior lateral sulcus is there. So here you can see it lies between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. The inferior cerebellar peduncle generally cannot be seen on the anterior aspect. Okay. On the posterior aspect it can be seen. And inferior cerebellar peduncles, total 3 peduncles are there which connects the cerebellum to the 3 parts of brainstem. Okay. So inferior one will connect the medulla oblongata to the cerebellum. Okay. So that is the posterior lateral sulcus. Now through posterior lateral sulcus, which nerve roots are emerging, you can see 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve. Okay. So which is the 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve? Glossopharyngeal, vagus and cranial root of accessory. So these are the 3 nerves which are emerging from the posterior lateral sulcus. Okay. Wait, let me show you the So this is a beautiful diagram showing the anterior features of the medulla oblongata. Okay. So what is this? What is this? This is the anterior median fissure. Okay. Now on the lateral to the anterior median fissure, you can see this is the pyramid. Okay, this is the pyramid. Next, if you go more laterally, then this is the anterior lateral sulcus. You can see. Now through the anterior lateral sulcus, you can see rootlets of the hypoglossal nerves are arising. Okay, so this is the first one. Next, if you go more laterally, then see here you are getting the olive, and if you go more posterior lateral, then you are getting the posterior lateral sulcus. Now through posterior lateral sulcus, you can see the which roots of cranial nerves are arising, 9, 10 and 11. Okay, to see 9, 10 and 11 cranial nerves are arising. Okay, so this is how, if you proceed, you will come to know which particular cranial nerve is attached to the which part of the brainstem. Okay, so till now how many cranial nerves you got? Last 4 cranial nerves. Till now we got last 4 cranial nerves. Okay, ये देखो यहाँ पे here we got the 12th cranial nerve. Okay, and here we got the 9, 10 and 11th cranial nerve. Okay, so total 4 cranial nerves are present over here. So what is pyramid? Already I mentioned. It is an elongated elevation on the either side of the anteromedian fissure. Okay, Why? Because of the aggregation of pyramidal fibers, and among them 75 to 85% of the fibers they decussate with each other. That is called as pyramidal decussation. Okay? Next, other features can also be seen, that are the olives. So what are olives? These are all oval elevation posterolateral to the pyramid. So this is pyramid, posterolateral to the pyramid, the oval elevations are there. So these are called as olive. See, this is one olive, this is one olive. Now why the olive are formed? Because of inferior olivary nucleus. Deep to this particular olive, you will be getting the inferior olivary nucleus. Okay, we'll discuss what is inferior olivary nucleus, don't worry. Next, inferior cerebellar peduncle, that means from olive, if you go more posterolaterally, then you will be getting the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, so inferior cerebellar peduncle, thick bundles of fibers are present which connects the medulla oblongata to the cerebellum. Okay. Next, features on the posterior aspect of the medulla. Now please keep that in mind, the posterior aspect of the medulla is divided into two parts. Okay, posterior aspect of the medulla is divided into two parts, closed part and open part. So जो lower part है, that is closed, upper part is open. Okay, here is the diagram. So here you can see this is the dorsal surface of the medulla. So this is the upper part which is open, this is the lower part which is closed. Okay, so you have to know the features of the closed part and you have to know the features of the open part. Is it clear everyone about the posterior external features or the external features of the posterior surface of medulla oblongata? Two parts are there, upper part is open, lower part is closed. Now the question is, what is the meaning of open and close? What I am talking about? ये जो open और close है, इसका मतलब क्या है? See the diagram over here. ये देखो, this part is open, this part is closed. इसका मतलब क्या है? What is the meaning of this? Please keep that in mind. In each and every part of brainstem, a cavity is there. ठीक है? Each and every part of the brainstem, a cavity is there. Okay. Now, if you see the medulla oblongata, what is the cavity? It is central canal. Okay, that central canal which is continuing in the spinal cord. In case of Pons, it is floor of fourth ventricle, or you can say fourth ventricle. And in case of midbrain, it is aqueduct of Sylvius. Okay. See, these things already I have shown you that day while explaining about the CSF flow. How the CSF is production of CSF is taking place and the how CSF is flowing. उठाओ इसको. Classroom is not for sleeping. ठीक है? Yes, three of you, please go and take rest outside. First, leave the classroom. Classroom is not for sleeping. If you are not feeling well, you can go out and take rest. I don't mind. Don't sleep inside the classroom. So, this brainstem, three parts are there. Now, these three parts are having three different cavities. Please keep that in mind. In case of medulla, this is mainly central canal. Okay. Now, you have to understand this point. ये जो closed part मैंने बोला है, through this closed part, the central canal is flowing. Okay. Now when it is opening, this particular part is forming the fourth ventricle. Okay. So that's why I told you closed part and open part. Closed part means the central canal है अंदर में. Okay. इसके अंदर में central canal है. Here central canal is there. And the upper part, why it is open? Because here we are getting the fourth ventricle. Okay. So these are from here also short questions are asked. Okay, that in which part of the brainstem which cavity is present, and cavity is nothing but filled with CSF. Okay, so that you have to follow. So as I said, on the dorsal view or on the posterior view of medulla oblongata, it is divided into two parts. lower part is closed part, upper part is open part. As you can see, ये upper part है open, lower part is closed. ठीक है. First you have to know the features on the closed part. Okay. So you can see the features. So first of all, the posterior median sulcus is there. So this is the posterior median sulcus. The same sulcus which you have seen in case of spinal cord. Same one will be extending into the spinal cord. Posterior median sulcus. ठीक है. Next, from the posterior median sulcus, if you go laterally on either side, okay, then you can see two elevations. Now, what are those two elevations? Total three elevations are there. That is fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, and inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, so from here you can see fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, and this is the inferior cerebellar peduncle. These are three, you can say, longitudinal elevations which are present on either side of the posterior median sulcus. Okay. Next, ये जो fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus है, here on the upper aspect you will be getting the nucleus of this particular knee. Okay, and these are also called as gracile tubercle and cuneate tubercle. If you see the upper part, okay, here you can see the elevation. This is called as gracile tubercle. You can see this is called as cuneate tubercle. So here the nucleus of same name will be present over here, which will be seen in the TS. Okay. And next there is another elevation, okay, which is present superiorly and laterally of the cuneate tubercle, that is called as tuber cinereum on either side. Okay. Now this tuber cinereum, can you tell me why this tuber cinereum is present? This is because of the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, spinal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. तो क्या होता है in the posterior aspect? First of all, the posterior median sulcus is there. Then if you come laterally, first of all you are getting the fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, and then peduncle, inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay. Now here on the upper aspect you are getting the tubercle. Okay, that is the gracile tubercle, cuneate tubercle, where the nuclei of same names are present over here, and just above laterally to the cuneate tubercle another elevation is there, that is called as tuber cinereum, and that tuber cinereum is because of the spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Means deep to this tuber cinereum, spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve is situated. That's why the elevation can be seen outside. Okay. So that is about the closed part. Okay. Now upper part, what is seen in the upper part? Features of the upper part. Now if you see the features of the upper part, that is forming the floor of fourth ventricle. Okay, floor of fourth ventricle. See, so ये हो गया lower part. This is the upper part. Upper part is forming the floor of fourth ventricle. Now this floor of fourth ventricle, different structures are present. Okay, so right now I am not discussing. In ventricle chapter, okay, the floor of fourth ventricle structures will be discussed. But you have to mention few, for example, median sulcus, hypoglossal, vagal triangle, area post trema, stria medullaris. Okay, these are some structures present in the open part, open upper part of the medulla oblongata. Okay, so that is all about the external features of the medulla oblongata. So see, I am following this particular part. So we have seen the division. In divisions, external features, I have started with the anterior aspect. We have seen the features. We have seen the posterior aspect. Now here in the medulla, no cranial nerves are attached on the posterior aspect. Okay, all the cranial nerves are attached on the anterior aspect. Okay, that already I have shown you. Okay, similarly we have to study about the pons and midbrain. Okay, so next will be the pons. So it is the middle part of the brainstem. जो pons होता है, you have seen in the diagram. It is the middle part of the brainstem, situated in between the medulla and the midbrain. Okay. Now the other name of pons is called as bridge. Okay. Why? Because on the either side the pons is continuing as middle cerebellar peduncle. Okay, जो pons होता है on both the side, the fibers which are coming out from the pons, they are forming the middle cerebellar peduncles. Okay, thus forming a bridge between the two cerebellar hemisphere. मतलब जो दो cerebellar hemisphere in between them, the bridge is formed. That's why it is called as pons. Okay, and the other name of the pons is called as bridge. If you see the dimension, it is approximately 2.5 centimeter long. Okay, and forming the upper part. Okay, upper part of floor of the fourth ventricle. Next, in case of pons, here you can see the location of the pons. Okay, now just posterior to that you can see the cerebellum is there, and in between the cerebellum and the pons, the fourth ventricle is present. So while studying about the medulla, okay, the anterior aspect we have discussed. On the posterior aspect, you can see in the lower part the central canal is present, but in the upper part the cavity of the fourth ventricle is there. Okay, तो pons का जो posterior aspect होगा, that will be forming the upper part of the floor of fourth ventricle. Okay, and here you can see the location of the pons. Okay. Next, from the pons, in this particular diagram you can see the fibers which are going on either side. Okay, this is forming the middle cerebellar peduncle. So from the pons, fibers are going on both the side. Okay, and those bundles of fibers, they are called as middle cerebellar peduncle. Okay, which is connecting the pons to the cerebellum. Next, if you see the external features of the pons, first of all, in external features, two surfaces and two borders are there. Okay, so what are the two surfaces? Anterior surface, posterior surface, two border, superior border and inferior border. Okay, let me show you the diagram. So in this diagram you can see the features showing on the anterior aspect of the pons. So this is the ventral surface of the pons, and इसके पीछे रहेगा dorsal surface. ठीक है, तो just now I have shown you dorsal surface में क्या रहेगा, what will be present on the dorsal surface? What is present on the dorsal surface? Floor of fourth ventricle. ठीक है, floor of fourth ventricle. तो again I am showing you the diagram. तो this is which surface? Anterior surface. Posterior surface will be forming the floor of fourth ventricle. Just now you have seen in the diagram. ठीक है. Now, so two surfaces I have shown you. How many borders are there? Two borders. So this is the superior border. ये देखो, this is the superior border and this is the inferior border. ठीक है. Next, so we have to see the features. So first of all, on the anterior aspect, it is first of all convex. If you see the anterior surface, it is convex. Okay. Next, transversely striated. So transverse striations are there. Why those transverse striations are there? Because of pontocerebellar fibers. Okay. Here you can see the striations. Okay. Now these striations are because of the pontocerebellar fibers. That means the fibers from pons, pontine nuclei is going to the cerebellum. Okay, the number of fibers are more. That's why you can see the striations on the surface. Okay. Next, in the midline, a groove is present on the anterior aspect. जो midline होता है, a groove is present. ये देखो. So this is the medulla oblongata. This is the pons. So in the midline, instead of this fissure, you will be getting a groove which is passing throughout the midline of the anterior aspect of the pons. ठीक है? That is called as basilar groove. That is called as basilar groove. Very important. It lodges the basilar artery. Okay? It lodges the basilar artery. तो short questions आता है. Next, can you see the trigeminal nerve over here? On the ventral surface, okay, if you go laterally, ventral surface laterally, then you can see the trigeminal nerve is arising, having two roots. ये देखो, this is the trigeminal nerve. So large sensory root and small motor root on both the side, you can see the trigeminal nerve is arising. See here. Okay. So from the ventral aspect, okay, of the body of the pons, which nerve is arising? Trigeminal nerve. That also laterally with two roots, sensory root and motor root. Sensory root is large one, motor root is small. Okay, and it can be seen very easily. So there is a important identifying feature in case of pons. Okay. Next, there is a junction between the pons and the medulla, that is called as pontomedullary junction. Okay, actually in the pontomedullary junction a shallow groove is present. So here you can see the pontomedullary junction. This is the pontomedullary junction where a shallow groove is present. Okay, through that groove which nerves are coming out? 6th, 7th and 8th cranial nerve. 6th, 7th, 8th cranial nerve. कहाँ से निकल के आ रहा है? From where it is coming? It is coming from the pontomedullary junction where a groove is present. Through that groove, these three nerves are coming up. Okay, which nerves are these? 6th, 7th and 8th cranial nerve. Can you name them? 6th is the abducens, 7th is the facial, 8th is the vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, तो can you see? ये देखो abducens, you can see the facial nerve, दो रहता है, nervus intermedius is also coming out, and then here you can see the vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, so see, as I have mentioned, every time when you will be studying about the various part of the brainstem, you will come to know exactly from where the cranial nerves are arising. Okay, okay. Next, so anterior surface is done. Next, how many borders are there? As I said, two borders are present. What are those two borders? Superior border and inferior border. Okay. Now here you can see this is the superior border. Okay. Now on the superior border, cerebral peduncles are attached. Okay. Stop talking. Cerebral peduncles. Now what are cerebral peduncles? That will be discussed in the midbrain part. Okay, but please keep that in mind. Cerebral peduncles are the part of midbrain. Okay, तो जो pons है, pons के ऊपर क्या रहेगा? What will be situated above the pons? Midbrain. ठीक है? तो the cerebral peduncles, these are the part of the midbrain. Okay, so जो superior border है, वहाँ पे cerebral peduncles are attached. Okay, as you can see, this I am talking about this. These are the cerebral peduncles. These are attached. Next, you can see two nerves are there. This is the oculomotor nerve and this is the trochlear nerve. These two nerves are also emerging at the superior border. Next, superior cerebellar arteries are also there which curve along this border. Superior cerebellar arteries will also curve along this border. Okay. Next, inferior border. Okay. So here you can see the superior cerebellar arteries will curve along this border, intervening between the oculomotor and the trochlear nerve. And inferior border, it is medulla is ending at the inferior border of the pons. So here you can see the diagram. So this is the pons. Okay. So the superior border, you can see the cerebral peduncle. Okay, are attached to this border. So this is the superior border. This is the inferior border. So superior border you can see cerebral peduncles are attached. Okay, and in inferior border you can see the medulla oblongata is terminating at the inferior border. Okay, so I have shown you the anterior surface. I have shown you superior border, inferior border. Which one is left? Posterior surface. Here you can see the posterior surface. Okay, so this is the posterior surface. Now the posterior surface of the pons is forming the upper part of the floor of the fourth ventricle. As you can see in the diagram, upper part of the floor of the fourth ventricle. Okay. Lastly is the midbrain. Okay. Now the midbrain is the upper and the shortest, or you can say smallest part of the brainstem. If you see the dimension, 2.5 centimeter in length and 2.5 centimeter in width. Okay, now it is connecting the hindbrain and the forebrain. Okay, the cavity of the midbrain is aqueduct of Sylvius. As I have mentioned that each and every part of the brainstem is having a separate cavity. ठीक है, and I am mentioning the cavity for each and every part. तो जो मिड ब्रेन होता है, मिड ब्रेन का कैविटी कौन सा है? दैट इज एक्विडक्ट ऑफ सिल्वियस. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट, द मिड ब्रेन इज पासिंग थ्रू द टेंटोरियल नॉच. एनीवन हैव यू हर्ड अबाउट द टेंटोरियम cerebelli? You have not studied the folds of dura mater. Folds of dura mater are done. हाँ, तो in folds of dura mater you have studied about the tentorial notch. Okay, actually notch is formed by the fold of dura mater that is called as tentorium cerebelli. Okay, so this tentorium cerebelli is forming the dural fold. Okay, and in between that the notch is present, and through that notch the brainstem is passing. Here you can see the diagram. ठीक है. Can you see the midbrain? So this is the supratentorial part of the brainstem. This is the infratentorial part. See, this is the tentorial. This is the tentorial notch, which is formed by the tentorium cerebelli, which is a fold of dura mater. Okay. Through that notch only the brainstem is extending upward. Okay. So midbrain portion is passing through the tentorial notch. So the part of the brainstem which is situated above the tentorial notch, that is called supratentorial part, which is situated below, that is called infratentorial part of the brainstem. Okay. Next, there are some important relations. Okay. Now if you see those relations, for example, this is the interpeduncular fossa. Okay. So this particular part of the midbrain is situated, is related to the various structures. For example, optic tract is there, posterior cerebellar artery, basal vein. Okay, so these are some important structures which are related to the midbrain. Okay. Next, on the posterior aspect of the midbrain also there are some structures. Okay, so here you can see this is the midbrain. Okay. So if you go to the posterior aspect of the midbrain, then you can see this is the splenium of the corpus callosum, then the posterior part of the thalamus. Okay, so these are also present on the posterior aspect of the midbrain. Important relations. Okay. Next, you have to understand one important part, okay, of the midbrain. Now, what is that? If you see the extension of the midbrain, it is ventrodorsally. Let me show you. If you see the extent of the midbrain, it is ventrodorsally through the tentorial notch. Okay, so it is passing through the tentorial notch. Now it composed of a pair of cerebral peduncle. तो जो पूरा midbrain होता है, okay, it composed of a pair of cerebral peduncles. Okay, तो two cerebral peduncles are there. Now each peduncle is further subdivided ventrodorsally. That means from anterior to posteriorly, this cerebral peduncle is divided into three different parts. Anteriormost part is called as crus cerebri, then the middle part is called as tegmentum, and the posteriormost part is called as tectum. Okay. For that, what you have to do? For that, you have to take a cross section of the midbrain in order to understand. Okay. Now, see, in this diagram, can you tell me where is the midbrain? In this diagram, can you tell me where is the midbrain? This is the medulla oblongata, right? This is the pons. ये देखो, this is the midbrain. Now, in the midbrain, I am talking about this particular part. I am talking about this particular part. Okay. Now, everywhere it is mentioned as cerebral crus or crus cerebri. Okay. But as a whole, if you see, it is cerebral peduncle. ठीक है, उसमें तीन पार्ट रहता है. Crus cerebri is there, tegmentum and tectum, from anterior to posterior. Okay, so everything cannot be seen in this view. For that, what you have to do? You have to take a section. ठीक है, suppose you are taking a section over here. Okay, then now, for example, what is present inside this? What is present inside this? How you will see? You will take a section. Once you take the section, then you can see what is present on the anterior aspect, what is present on the posterior aspect, right? Similarly, यहाँ पे भी we have to take a section. so that we can see the structures which are present at various places. Okay, so for that the diagram is very important. So let me show you the diagram. This is the diagram, very simple diagram. Okay, so this is the anterior aspect, this is the posterior aspect. Okay, so as I said, two cerebral peduncles are there. Now these cerebral peduncles are made up of three components. Okay, so first of all, the anteriorly, see, you are getting the crus cerebri. Okay, next if you go posteriorly, then you are getting the tegmentum. Now in between the tegmentum and the crus cerebri, a dark color structure is present, that is called as substantia nigra. Okay, where dopaminergic neurons are present, from where the dopamine secretions are taking place. Okay, next if you go more posteriorly, okay, then you can see the tectum is present. So like this the subdivisions are done in case of midbrain. Okay, I know it is difficult to understand the structure of midbrain. Okay, so with the help of the diagram, you have to study it, then only you will be able to understand. Okay, but for your reference, I am using easier diagrams. For example, see, this particular part is called as cerebral peduncle. Okay, in cerebral peduncle, see, you are getting the crus cerebri, substantia nigra, and tegmentum, and on the posterior aspect, you are getting the tectum. Okay, so these are the important features, okay, of the midbrain. Okay, now this crus cerebri, they are also called as crura cerebri. Okay, present on the ventral aspect, emerges from the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, from the cerebral hemisphere they will emerge and they will converge. Now when they are converging, they are forming the boundaries of the interpeduncular fossa. In between them, the peduncular fossa is present. Okay, this is one important point. Next important point is the origin of two nerves from the midbrain. What are these two nerves? Oculomotor nerve and trochlear nerve. Okay, here you can see the origin of the two nerves, oculomotor nerve and the trochlear nerve. Okay, so oculomotor nerve emerges from a groove on the medial side of the crus cerebri. दोनों crus cerebri के बीच में groove होता है. From that groove on the ventral aspect, the oculomotor nerves are emerging, as you can see in the diagram. Okay, next the trochlear nerve emerges from the dorsal aspect of the midbrain. This is the exception which I mentioned in the beginning. Okay, this one. This is the trochlear nerve. As you can see, it is coming from the dorsal aspect like this. Okay, so it is coming from the dorsal aspect of the midbrain, curls around the lateral aspect of the cerebral peduncle. Okay, and then it will appear on the ventral surface. Okay, so that is the exception for trochlear nerve. Next, in the dorsal surface. Okay, now this is the diagram showing the dorsal surface. ठीक है, dorsal surface में क्या रहता है? Of the midbrain present four rounded elevations. Okay, जो dorsal surface होता है उसमें four rounded elevations are there. Now those four rounded elevations, if you see, ये देखो, these are the four rounded elevations. Okay, now what these are called? These are called as colliculi. Two superior colliculi, two inferior colliculi are there. Together, these are also called as corpora quadrigemina. Okay, or also called as colliculi. Two superior colliculi, two inferior colliculi. Now, these two colliculi are separated by cruciform sulcus. Okay, as you can see, they are separated by cruciform sulcus. Okay. Now, the vertical limb of the sulcus traced above. If you trace above, then you will be getting the pineal gland. Okay. Now here you can see, if you trace above the vertical limb, then here you will be getting the pineal gland. So this is how the location of the pineal gland can be identified very easily. Okay. Next, there are two important connections. Okay, that is the superior brachium and inferior brachium. As you can see, the superior colliculi, okay, is superior colliculi is there, inferior colliculi is there, okay, and along with that two swellings are there. These are called as geniculate body, medial and lateral geniculate body, okay. So superior brachium connect the superior colliculus to the lateral geniculate body. So this is superior colliculi, it is connected to the lateral geniculate body by superior brachium, and inferior colliculus connected to the medial geniculate body by inferior brachium. Now why this I am mentioning about the geniculate bodies? Because in this particular geniculate bodies, the fibers of auditory pathway and the fibers of visual pathway are present. Lateral geniculate body, which fibers will be there? Visual pathway fibers, okay, and medial geniculate body, which fibers will be there? Auditory fibers, okay. Very important fibers are passing through this particular pathway, okay, and that is the part of the brainstem, posterior surface of the midbrain, okay. So posterior surface of the midbrain, it appears like this, okay. So that is all about the external features. So today if you see the list, I have explained up to the external features of each and every part or each and every subdivisions of the brainstem. Along with that, we have seen the origin of the last 10 cranial nerves, okay. So from next class onwards, we will be discussing about the internal features, okay. In internal features, how to study? Total 8 sections are there, okay. So we will be using those 8 sections. So 4 sections are there in the medulla, 2 in the pons, 2 in the midbrain. With the help of those 8 sections, we will try to understand the internal structure of the brainstem, and that is the most difficult part, okay. And in neuro, you can expect one question from this particular part, okay, and based on that, we will be trying to understand the applied aspect, okay. Thank you.